There's a pill called NZT. You take one. For a day, you become the smartest, sharpest, most capable version of yourself. Every book you ever skimmed, every face you ever passed on the street, every word of a foreign language you heard once and forgot, all of it. Right there. Total recall, total focus, the full brain. Now imagine you're a guy named Brian Finch, stuck in a temp job, can't pay rent, can't look your dying father in the eye, haven't hit a single goal you ever set for yourself. And one afternoon, an old friend named Eli slips you one of these pills and tells you it'll fix everything. It does, for exactly one day. Then, Eli turns up dead. The FBI starts hunting you for his murder, and a United States Senator named Eddie Morra walks into your life with a gun and an offer. This is Limitless. CBS, 2015, 22 episodes, one season. One of the smartest, weirdest, funniest procedurals network television ever made. And then, of course, CBS canceled it. Because of course they did. But before any of that, before federal agents and Russian heists and the finale they never got to follow up on, there's just Brian Finch having the worst week of his life. Let's get into it. Brian Finch is broke. He's late on rent, late on goals, late on basically everything. His dad is in the hospital with what doctors think is just exhaustion. But Brian knows it's worse. He just doesn't have the medical training to prove it. Then Brian runs into his old friend Eli. Eli looks unbelievable, sharp, focused, doing well. He hands Brian a clear pill and tells him to try it, says it'll change everything. Brian takes it. For the next several hours, he's a different person. He blows through his temp work in an afternoon. He pulls medical knowledge out of his memory he didn't even know he had. He figures out his father's actual diagnosis. NZT lets him use his full brain, and right now, that brain is humming. He goes back to find Eli, hoping for more. Eli is dead on the floor, shot. The FBI shows up. The FBI thinks Brian did it. Of course they do. There's no other explanation that makes sense. Brian goes on the run, tracks down one of Eli's co-workers looking for more pills, and gets shot in the leg by Eli's real killer, a man named Adam Honeycutt. Brian passes out. When he wakes up, he is not in a hospital. He is in a quiet, expensive room with a United States Senator. The senator's name is Eddie Morra. Morra explains very calmly that NZT is real, that he's been on it for years, and that he has the only known counter drug to its devastating side effects. Mora will give Brian a daily pill and a daily shot to keep him alive. In exchange, Brian will never ever tell anyone about him. Brian agrees, because what else is he going to do? Then he calmly walks back to the FBI, robs a bank to get their attention, long story, and hands over evidence that proves Honeycutt killed Eli. Honeycutt is arrested. The FBI is impressed. Specifically, an agent named Rebecca Harris is impressed. Rebecca offers Brian a deal. Come work for the Bureau as a consultant. Use NZT for them. The FBI gets the smartest man on earth, and Brian gets the one thing he actually wants. They pull strings to get his father to the front of the liver transplant list and save his life. Brian says yes, but here's the thing about Rebecca Harris. She's not just doing this for the Bureau. Her own father was found dead in a river. The Bureau thinks he was on NZT. She's been chasing this drug her entire career. And the kid she just hired? He's already lying to her on day one. Welcome to Limitless. Brian shows up to work at the FBI ready to be Sherlock Holmes. He gets a desk. The Bureau is monitoring his NZT use very carefully, which is hilarious to watch because they have no idea he's also taking a daily shot to neutralize the side effects. As far as the FBI is concerned, Brian should be cooked. He keeps acting fine. Nobody knows why. While Rebecca and her partner Boyle work an assassination case involving a journalist named Stephen Fisher, Brian is supposed to sit there and translate Farsi. He does not sit there. He breaks out of the analyst pen, pieces together that Fisher was killed by a bomb maker called Taurus, and IDs Taurus as a guy named Darren Cullen. Then Brian notices something nobody else did. Fisher's heart rate spiked weirdly before the bomb went off. 28-year-olds don't have strokes. Two other people Fisher's age and race died of strokes recently. They were all targeted with a genetically engineered virus reverse-engineered from Genghis Khan's DNA. The actual target was a US Army general named Ram Ananda. The actual conspiracy traces back to a guy named Miles Amos who was trying to sabotage an election. Brian solves all of this from his desk in about 2 days. Naz, the boss, almost fires him for going around her. Then she promotes him. Meanwhile, two new things show up in Brian's life. First, his bodyguards. 2 FBI agents he nicknames Mike and Ike, which obviously aren't their real names. Their job is to follow Brian everywhere, give him his pill every morning, and make sure he doesn't go off script. Mike and Ike are going to become this show's secret weapon. But right now, they're just 2 guys in suits annoyed that Brian keeps trying to ditch them. Second, his dad's new home health nurse. She's polite, she's cheerful, she's terrifyingly attentive. She is also 100% working for Eddie Morra. Brian doesn't know that yet. The nurse is there to monitor him through his father. And every time Brian tries to look up Senator Edward Mora and NZT in the same Google search, his computer mysteriously powers itself off. Yeah, about that. The case of the week is the sniper murder of a former FBI agent named Ray Dixon. Brian and Rebecca trace it to a drug lord called Marcos Ramos and his hitman, a 6.5-foot tall enforcer who goes by La Zebra, which means the zebra, which is a very strange thing to call a hitman. Brian figures out La Zebra is actually a guy named Johan Makinen. Then he figures out Johan couldn't have pulled the trigger because Johan is missing a hand. Then he figures out Marcos Ramos is dead, killed by a corrupt FBI task force that used to work for him, who are now running their own black market operation under the guise of hunting him. The sergeant running it, a guy named Mora, gets arrested. Case closed. But the case of the week is not why this episode matters. This episode introduces the man who is going to ruin Brian's life. His name is Mr. Sands. Sands is Mora's enforcer. Sands shows up wherever Mora needs a problem solved, which usually means somebody is about to die. He smiles a lot. He's polite. He's the kind of polite that makes you understand immediately that polite is the most dangerous thing he can be. Sands sits Brian down and explains the new arrangement. Brian doesn't work for the FBI anymore. He works for Mora now. Sands will give him orders. If Brian does not follow them, Sands will hurt every single person Brian loves. To make the point, Brian breaks up with his current girlfriend Shauna that same night. Brian had run into her again earlier and they'd reconnected. Now he's pushing her away to keep her safe. This is the moment Brian Finch realizes he is not the FBI's secret weapon. He's Mora's mole, and the FBI has no idea. Brian gets his first classified case, Chinese spy. Big deal. He immediately doesn't care because his online friend Arthur Maciel just got framed for murder, and Brian and Rebecca decide to go solve that instead. Meanwhile, Sands gives Brian his first real assignment for Mora. Find out exactly how much the FBI knows about NZT. Steal the files. If Brian doesn't, Sands will withhold the daily shot, and Brian will start dying from the side effects of his own pill. Brian fakes a file. Sands sees through it instantly. Then Brian's father starts coughing. The nurse, the cheerful Mora-loyal nurse, has injected Brian's father with a virus. He could be saved. He won't be unless Brian hands over the real files. Brian hands over the real files. When he reads them, he finds something he can't stop reading. The FBI keeps a list of suspected NZT users, past and present. One of those names is Rebecca's father, the man whose unsolved death is the entire reason Rebecca took this job. So now Brian knows how Rebecca's father really died. And he can't tell her, because if he does, Sands kills his entire family. Welcome to the moral nightmare that is the rest of this season. Now that Brian has the file on Rebecca's father, he has to decide what to do with it. He chooses neither. He chooses to make videos of himself on NZT, talking to himself, off NZT, telling himself not to tell her. Because Brian on NZT is a different person from Brian off NZT, and Brian on NZT is a much better liar. The case of the week involves a planned terrorist attack on New York that traces back through a meth lab ring to 2 brothers, Sam and Chris Garper. Chris is willing to flip on his brother for a lighter sentence. Brian is the one who convinces him. Then Chris dies during the takedown anyway, trying to do the right thing. That's the kind of week Brian is having. He also accidentally hits on Rebecca's secret boyfriend, an FBI SWAT agent named Casey Rooks, while pretending to be a normal guy who needs self-defense lessons. Brian, on NZT, picks up self-defense moves in about an hour. Rooks notices. Rooks does not know about NZT. Rooks is starting to think there's something very wrong with this temp consultant kid. At the end of the episode, Brian breaks his own rules and tells Rebecca about her father. Then he records one more video to himself, justifying it. Sleep tight, future Brian. You're going to need it. This is the episode where Limitless stops being a procedural with a twist and becomes a full-on conspiracy thriller. Sands wants Rebecca off the trail, so Sands stops giving Brian his shot. The side effects start kicking in fast. Headaches, hallucinations, bleeding. NZT, without the counter drug, doesn't make you stupid. It kills you. Brian and Rebecca trace the origin of the drug to a brilliant pharmaceutical scientist named Andrew Epperly. Epperly is supposed to be dead. He is not. He faked his own death after he realized his test patients kept dying or disappearing once NZT got loose on the streets. Epperly tested NZT on his own father, who had Alzheimer's. That's how it spread. He thought he was helping. He was helping. He was also getting people killed. One of his early test patients was Rebecca's father. Sands blows up Epperly's apartment. Rebecca survives. Naz, the FBI boss, sits Rebecca down and finally tells her the truth. Naz hired her specifically because of her father's connection to NZT. The whole department was built around finding out what happened to him. And then, at the very last second, Senator Eddie Morra finally appears in person to give Brian his shot back, plus 5 extra NZT pills. Mora explains gently that this whole crisis was a test to see if Brian was somebody who just takes orders, like Sands, or somebody with character. Brian, of course, has character, which is also why Brian, of course, is doomed. Brian has 5 free NZT pills and 1 day off. He is going to Ferris Bueller this thing. He fakes sick when Mike and Ike show up, swallows a free pill, and prepares to live his best life. Then the CIA kidnaps him from his apartment. Naz did not authorize this. Naz is furious. The CIA does not care. They drop him into the middle of an off-the-books mission, deep into hostile territory, surrounded by mercenaries who fully intend to kill him the second the pill wears off. Brian, running on fumes, NZT crashing, has to think his way out. Most of the team dies. Brian doesn't. He goes home. He does not get his Ferris Bueller day. This is the episode where Limitless casually reveals that NZT is not just a senator's secret. It's a national security weapon. Multiple agencies want their hands on it. Multiple agencies will burn Brian alive to get it. Naz is arrested. She paid a known terrorist a large sum of money. The Bureau thinks she's funding international terror. She's not. She paid him because Southeast Asian pirates kidnapped her niece, and the only person who could bargain with the pirates was a guy on a watch list. The whole Brian situation grinds to a halt while Naz is in custody. Brian hides out at Naz's house, where he meets her daughter, Ava. Ava is smart. She's funny. She figures out something is going on with him in about 10 minutes, he tells her. She runs the rescue with him. The plan involves negotiating with a pirate captain by gifting him a rare pinball machine. This is, on the record, a thing that happens in this show. It works. Naz's niece is freed. Naz is reinstated. Brian and Ava have a moment. Naz, half smiling, says she could do worse. Naz, being a real human being with a daughter and a niece and a heart, is the kind of detail this show throws away in a B-plot, while other prestige dramas spent whole seasons trying to humanize half their cast. Limitless just does it in 1 episode and moves on. Brian wants his own office. He calls it headquarters. He spends the entire episode trying to earn it by knocking out the FBI's top 10 most wanted list in 2 weeks using NZT. He starts hitting names so fast it draws attention from upstairs. Naz pulls the plug, but during the spree, Brian realizes one of the names on the list is innocent. He pivots, finds the actual killer, clears the wrong guy. The real story of this episode is at home. Brian's father, post-transplant, can sense his son is hiding everything from him. The distance between them is widening. So Brian finally breaks Mora's first rule. He tells his father about NZT. His father takes it about as well as you would expect, which is to say, badly. That's a thread now. Pull it gently, it's going to come apart later. Boyle has a US Army Ranger buddy whose brain-controlled prosthetic arm killed his wife. The Ranger swears it wasn't him. The arm just did it. Brian investigates. Multiple prosthetic arms in the country have been hacked recently. Brian thinks his case is one of them. It is not. The Ranger knew about the hacks and used them as cover to murder his own wife. Sometimes a man with a robot arm is just a murderer. Meanwhile, Brian's father is done. He wants Brian out of the FBI. He goes to a lawyer friend, sets up a case to sue the Bureau on his son's behalf, and threatens Naz directly. He won't sue yet, but if anything happens to Brian, he will burn the FBI to the ground. Naz takes the threat. Naz absorbs it. Naz is starting to genuinely care about this kid. Mike and Ike are unhappy. They've been escorting Brian for months. They get no respect. They get no acknowledgement. Then, during a routine pharmacy run for Brian's daily NZT pill, an armed robbery breaks out. Ike gets shot. 80 NZT pills go missing. The FBI recovers them in transit, and then a member of Casey Rooks' SWAT team intercepts them and skims them for himself. The whole team takes them. Casey, Rebecca's secret boyfriend, hesitates. Casey wants to do the right thing. Then Rebecca breaks up with him by text message. Casey takes the pill. NZT does not work the same way for everyone. For some people, it is a tool. For others, it strips away every reason they had not to do the worst thing they could imagine. A SWAT operator on NZT realizes a teammate has been sleeping with his wife and murders him on the spot. Casey tries to cover it up. Brian figures it out and tells Rebecca. The building goes into lockdown. Casey takes Brian and Rebecca hostage at gunpoint. Then Boyle, Rebecca's partner, who has had Brian's back since week 1, walks into the standoff and shoots Casey through the head. After it's over, Brian tells Boyle the part Boyle didn't see. Casey had a clean shot at Brian after the trigger was pulled. He could have taken it. He chose to lower the gun instead. Boyle does not change his face. Boyle is not going to second-guess himself for keeping Brian breathing on a maybe. I'm not going to make a joke here. Casey was a good agent. He just wasn't a strong one. Ike wakes up in the hospital. Brian, for the first time, calls his bodyguards by their actual names. Daryl, Jason. They're not Mike and Ike anymore. Senator Eddie Morra walks onto a stage at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum to give a speech. Someone tries to shoot him. The shooter is a woman named Piper Baird. Piper used to work for Mora. She helped develop the immunity shot. Then she started asking questions about what Mora was actually doing with NZT. Mora didn't like her questions. Piper went rogue, broke into one of his research facilities, stole a year's supply of the counter-drug enzyme, and ran. Sands wants her dead. Sands tells Brian to find her. Brian finds her. Brian sees, for the first time, that he might not be on the right side of any of this. So Brian helps her fake her own death. Sands is reasonably impressed. Mora, more impressed. Brian, terrified. At the end of the episode, Senator Edward Mora steps in front of a press scrum and announces he is running for president of the United States. Of course he is. Brian goes to Quantico. He gets pulled into a serial killer case. The legendary profiler running it is, Brian quickly realizes, a fraud. A guy whose famous early conviction put an innocent man in prison. Brian proves the wrong man is locked up and helps catch the real killer. Meanwhile, back in New York, Sands realizes there is a problem. The coat Senator Morra was wearing during the assassination attempt is in an FBI evidence locker. The blood on the coat will show NZT in his system. If Rebecca tests it, the senator's whole secret comes out. Sands has Brian get a duplicate coat with clean Mora blood. Brian sweet-talks the evidence clerk and swaps the coats while Rebecca, completely unaware, is on her way down to retrieve the original. Rebecca tests the coat. Clean. Dead end. She has no idea Brian is the dead end. Brian gets a new bodyguard, a guy named Spike. Jason, the artist formerly known as Ike, hates him on sight. The case of the week is a programmer who built a robotic version of herself before getting murdered. Brian and Rebecca interview the robot. Yes, they literally interrogate a robot copy of a dead woman to figure out who killed her. This is the kind of premise that this show casually deploys mid-season. CBS put this on between CSI and Criminal Minds. Nobody told CBS what they had. Meanwhile, Rebecca asks Brian to come down to the evidence locker on a different case. Brian goes pale. The clerk who let him swap Mora's coat will recognize him on sight. Then word comes in. The clerk just died. He had a peanut allergy. Someone fed him peanuts. Sands killed the only witness who could expose Brian. Brian did not ask Sands to kill him. Sands killed him anyway, because Sands is always Sands. Quick break. If you're still here at the halfway mark, you are exactly the kind of viewer this channel runs on. Hit subscribe so the next deep dive lands on your homepage. We've got 8 episodes left, and Limitless saved its absolute best for last. Back to it. The FBI's list of undercover agents leaks. Brian is sent in to extract one of them, an agent named Lucy Church, who is deep undercover with a human trafficking ring and refuses to come in because she is this close to taking it down. Lucy is messy. Lucy is reckless. Lucy is also right. They take down the ring together. She develops feelings for Brian. Brian is in too deep with too many other things to care. Meanwhile, back in New York, Sands does something almost charming. He sits down with Rebecca, the woman he has spent the entire season trying to destroy, and offers her a job. Come work for Senator Morra. Get paid. Stop digging. He is, in his way, trying to save her life. Rebecca declines. She has no idea who she just turned down. Brian's sister, Rachel, is in town to hang out. Then Sands shows up at Brian's apartment, bleeding and injured, and asks for help. Brian stitches him up. Brian disappears with him. Brian leaves Rachel to stall the FBI. Sands, for the first time all season, tells Brian why he does what he does. Sands has a son. The boy has been kidnapped, and to get him back, Sands is being forced to murder his former army colleagues, one by one. In a perfect coincidence, Rebecca and Boyle catch a kidnapping case the same morning. The victim is a boy from a wealthy political family. Surprise! It's Sands' son. Brian and Sands rescue him. The kid gets out alive. Sands says nothing afterward. Sands is back to being Sands by sundown. But for one night, Mr. Sands, the smiling assassin, was a father trying to save his child. And Brian Brian saw it. Meanwhile, back at Brian's apartment, Jason checks in on Rachel, and they end up sleeping together. Yes, the bodyguard slept with Brian's sister. Yes, this comes up later. Yes, this show is so confident in its weird little rhythms, it just throws this in as a B-plot button. The lights go out across Manhattan. $8 million vanishes from a vault in a mutilated money facility. Brian and Rebecca chase the perpetrators through a citywide blackout. That's the case. The episode is not the case. The episode is at home. Brian's mother is at his apartment when the bodyguards stop by to check on him. Mom does not realize they don't know about Brian's sister. Mom blurts out that there was an injured man in the apartment recently. Jason puts it together. Rachel, trying to clean up, accidentally produces Brian's emergency stash of NZT pills. Brian's mother now knows everything. She does not handle it well. She confronts him hard. Brian's father, his lawyer, refuses to make this go away. The pills are confiscated. The family is done. Mom cuts him out. Brian, broken, steals his pills back, leaves Rebecca a note, and runs. This is where the season turns. Brian had something to lose at the start of every episode. He just lost most of it. The episode title is the Russian word for limitless. Brian is in St. Petersburg. He went to Russia to find Piper Baird, the woman he saved from Sands. Piper has been working in secret on a permanent NZT immunity shot, the kind that would let Brian walk away from Mora forever. The last ingredient she needs is locked in the vault of an eco-friendly Russian millionaire. Yes, that's the show. Eco-friendly Russian millionaire vault heist, episode 18. They steal it. Piper gets her last component. The cure is real and possible. Meanwhile, back at the FBI, Naz realizes Brian is gone. His pills are gone, and her star consultant just went rogue on her watch. She launches a full-scale search. For the first time all season, Brian Finch is not in the room. Brian comes home from Russia. The FBI is now watching him 24 hours a day. Sands is also watching him 24 hours a day. Rebecca, smart enough to put the pieces together at this point, has her own quiet investigation running, helped by Daryl and Jason, who have started to suspect their friend is in something well over his head. There's a case of the week. A man murdered for his kidney. Brian solves it. Sure, that's not the point. The point is that while Brian was in Russia, Sands got to Piper first. He has her. He has her supply of the immunity shot enzyme. He is forcing her to manufacture more NZT. Brian goes to Mora and confesses. Mora tells him calmly that Sands has gone AWOL. Sands is not following Mora's orders anymore. Sands is running his own play. And Rebecca shows up at Brian's apartment that night with a pair of handcuffs. She is done being lied to. She wants the truth. All of it. He tells her. All of it. Brian is Mora's mole. Has been since the pilot. Mora owns him. Sands is the man who handles him. Sands also killed her father. Rebecca takes the news the way Rebecca takes everything. She does not scream. She does not cry. She takes Brian's NZT pill for that day and swallows it. Now she is a temporary genius too. Together, on NZT, they go after Sands. They track down a former Mora researcher named Houston, a man so destroyed by NZT addiction, he is barely conscious. He left behind a notebook. They find it. The notebook leads them to a former NZT addict living in a trailer in the middle of nowhere. She gives them a cigarette butt with the killer's DNA. As they leave the trailer, a sniper opens fire. Sands sent him. Rebecca takes the bullet. Brian on NZT performs field surgery on Rebecca, using whatever he can find in the trailer. He saves her life. Then they go to Houston's hospital room and rig a homemade EEG machine to communicate with him through his coma. Houston confirms it. Sands killed Rebecca's father. Sands is the man. They bait Sands. They arrest him. Mr. Sands, Senator Morra's silent enforcer, the man who has terrorized this entire show for 20 episodes, is finally in handcuffs. That's not the kind of moment most network procedurals earn. Limitless earned it. NZT hits the streets of New York City, not in trickles, in waves. Bodies start dropping. Hospitals fill up. The DEA gets involved. The FBI partners with them on a citywide manhunt. They are looking for a single illegal lab that is producing enough NZT to start a national epidemic. Brian is also in trouble. His pills are gone. He has no resources to keep looking for Piper, who is still trapped wherever Sands had her. He has nothing. The Brian Finch who started this season had no rent and no purpose. The Brian Finch in this episode has neither. And now he also has the FBI's most expensive consultant chair to lose. Same man, same problem, new volume. The clock is ticking. Sands is in custody, but Sands has been planning longer than anyone realized, and the lab is still running. Sands has a plan. It involves Canada's Northwest Passage, an international diplomat, an assassination, and an NZT-fueled coup attempt by men inside the US government who decided one senator on the drug wasn't enough. Boyle and Rebecca race to stop the hit. They fail. The diplomat dies. But the killer they capture afterward, broken on NZT, gives them everything. Sands' real lab, the location, the whole operation, The FBI raids it. Piper is gone. They missed her by hours, but she has left behind the formula. Sands, somehow already free of FBI custody, is on site. He and Rebecca cross paths one last time. She shoots him. He goes down. NZT is starting to wear off Brian. The side effects are coming back hard. He is dying. He goes home, to his parents' house, the same house his mother told him he could never come back to. Piper is already there. She brought him a permanent immunity shot, the kind that lasts forever, the kind he has been chasing since episode 6. She injects him. It works, but Piper cannot stay. The cure cannot fall into the wrong hand, so she takes the formula and disappears. Sands has a plan. It involves Canada's Northwest Passage, an international diplomat, an assassination, and an NZT-fueled coup attempt by men inside the US government who decided one senator on the drug wasn't enough. Boyle and Rebecca race to stop the hit. They fail. The diplomat dies. But the killer they capture afterward, broken on NZT, gives them everything. Sands' real lab, the location, the whole operation. The FBI raids it. Piper is gone. They missed her by hours, but she has left behind the formula. Sands, somehow already free of FBI custody, is on site. He and Rebecca cross paths one last time. She